Well, we're now in the third week of Advent, and this is the last full week of Advent. Now, as it turns out, that we will be next week, most of the week will be in the fourth week of Advent, and then we go right into the Christmas season, obviously on Christmas Day. But the fourth week of Advent varies. Obviously, sometimes you see it's only 24 hours, sometimes it's a full 7 days. In this case, since Christmas is on a Thursday, it's a little bit more than half a week next week, but we'll worry about that next week. We're done with Isaiah for now. Now we're going to look at various other readings. And today we're in the book of Numbers. Now, we have to understand, we've looked at some of the other books, and obviously mostly Isaiah during this time. So when we're looking at the book of Numbers, there is a different reality here, because where we are in the book of Numbers is the Torah. What is the Torah? The first 5 books of the Bible. These are the books in the Jewish scriptures that are their most important books. The Torah. So here we are looking at, basically, besides the fact Genesis, which focuses obviously on the early days of humanity, up until Israel, the nation of Israel, goes to Egypt. Not only the nation of Israel, the person of Israel, his family, go to Egypt. Then we go into Exodus, where the whole story of turning out of God, leading them out of Egypt because they had become slaves over 400 years. And so now God is leading them out of Egypt. And now everything else in the Torah is from that point, everything else from going out of Egypt up until entering the Promised Land. Then we get into the other books, like we go into Joshua. Right after the Jews enter Israel enters the Promised Land, then we go into the book of Joshua, which is not in the Torah. So these first 5 books of the Torah are important, and any time you're reading something from them, this is important, because these are also known as the books of Moses. It was once believed, it's not believed anymore, but it was once believed that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. And the interesting thing there is he wrote even the book of Deuteronomy, which includes within it the death of Moses, which would kind of say, how is he going to write that? But in any case, the first 5 books of the Bible do focus on the early day, the formation of the nation of Israel, and also then the Exodus from Egypt. And in between is where the nation of the people, the family of Israel, who is actually Jacob, ends up in Egypt. So that's where we're talking on this book. Now, we're only going to be focused on this book today, and we're only going to be focused on the Torah, I think, today. Until Christmas. I could be wrong there. I have to look at, looking at some of the readings coming up, and I actually haven't looked at the readings for next week. So, but this is it. Now, what is happening? We're seeing this prediction of what is coming. Now, again, remember, when we're talking about the Torah, we're talking about from Exodus to, let me make sure I have them right. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy actually, it throws me off a bit. Deuteronomy actually stands for the number 2, but it is the 5th book in the Bible. So in any case, we see this this whole thing from Exodus to Deuteronomy focused on the journey of the Hebrews, the nation of Israel, however you want to describe them. I don't call them Jews yet, because they're not called Jews until the nation of Judah is formed. But anyway, there they are on their way to the Promised Land as the Lord is leading them. And then, of course, there are problems which come up in this book, which we're not going to look at right now, come up in this book, which is the people doubt the action of God. And when that happens, the Lord basically works to how can I best put it? Send a new generation into the promised land and not the one that left Egypt. So that's where we go. And we're in the midst of this. Now, we're looking at this prophecy from Balaam. And we're here in the 24th book of Numbers. Now, in this prophecy, we're listening to words of Balaam, and Balaam is talking about the future. So here, we're understanding this whole focus on through the nation of Israel, which is not yet the political entity, but it is the people, the Hebrews. Through this nation, the Lord is going to bring out his whole plan of salvation. And here he is focused on them. He's calling them to act in a way that glorifies his name. As they're on their way into the promised land, they are led by Moses, who's given a very special status. One of the things you learn when you're dealing with Moses is don't cross him. And it's not so much that Moses will get back at you, God will get back at you. It's true. And therefore, because he's establishing the authority of Moses, that he is the one whom the Lord has called. And remember, Moses' history, this is always fascinating. Moses' history is kind of sketchy. We know he was originally a Hebrew. He was brought up in the Pharaoh's family. He murders a man and has to go into exile. It was there that God chooses him. He stutters, so he's not strong in speaking. He has to have Aaron help him. And so the Lord chooses him. And we can look at that. Everything that the Lord does through Moses is because the Lord chose Moses. None of it is because of Moses. Did you understand that? And this is one of the things, this is one of the ways the Lord works. And the ways the Lord works. Remember, never forget that saying, what you hid from the wise and the clever you gave to the merest children. And so Moses, in his very low point in his life, when he is exiled from the royal family, of which he is a member, for murdering a fellow Egyptian who had punished or severely beat a Hebrew, and even the Hebrews rejected him. He is the one who God chooses. And now what we're looking at this prophecy from Balaam is the Lord is saying through Balaam to the people that there will come a time that the Lord is going to use this people to be these are my words, the jumping off point for the new Messiah. And remember, from that point on, the nation is looking towards the Messiah and the coming of the Messiah. And so we see all that. And we understand as we look at Genesis, and this is important, that everything begins with the Lord after the fall promising this new salvation and this restoration. And so this is what we're dealing with right here, all in process. Sometimes you'll see a movie that has these time effects, and one of my favorites is Interstellar. It's really rooted in all of that, because if you see Interstellar, which, by the way, the theme music is all based on time. If you know anything about the theme music, you'll notice it's actually like a clock, and it's all based on time. And if you've seen it, then it's a depiction of the theory of relativity. So what you're seeing is people living in two different periods of time. And by that, I mean they're living at exactly the same time to each other. Relatively, they're the same time to each other, but one is living in a time that moves faster. The other is living in a time that moves slower. So even though their lifespan doesn't change, their existence does. And so it's fascinating. Well, here we are looking at this same concept of the Lord is speaking of a future time. He's not talking about what it means when it's coming, the whole bit. And in that future time, he's talking about the coming of the Messiah. And it's described specifically in here, or he describes it specifically in here, as a star. Let me see here if it's in this particular reading. And it's part of Numbers, but let me see if it's in this particular reading. Right here, 17. And we see that a star shall advance from Jacob. Well, who is Jacob? Jacob is also the father of Israel. He's also the father of 12 sons who become the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. That's who Jacob is. But what the Lord is saying will advance from Jacob. What does that mean? Well, we can look at it today and say it will advance from the Jewish people. And we know that. And out comes Jesus. And we see that. Now, Scripture scholars tell us, even though we know that we're also talking about the Star of Bethlehem, that's not what the star means. It means basically this prediction of Jesus. Go back. Anytime you see the prediction, any kind of prediction of Jesus, go back to Emmaus. And you can recognize that as Jesus is describing all the scriptures that refer to him, this would be one of the scriptures. But it's a fascinating concept to look at. And again, this is one of the reasons why I love the movie Interstellar, because one of the things to understand is God sees all of time. He is outside of time. He sees all of time. And so he's describing what is coming in the future, but it's over, as we know, a couple thousand years. So even though he says this is coming, it's not coming tomorrow. Well, we're going through the same dynamic. The Lord said, I am coming. I will come back. We know that's coming, but it's not necessarily coming tomorrow. And this is the whole message of Advent, is we're looking forward to Christ's coming, but we don't know when that is. And we go back to the time of Moses. They're looking forward to Christ coming the first time, but they don't know when that is. And this is fascinating. And notice, again, it's been, it's about 2,000 years, if I have that right. Because you're going from the time of Moses with the Pharaoh and everything else. And that continues through David, through the split of the kingdom, through all the ups and downs of the two kingdoms, through the loss of the nation of Israel, to ultimately Judah, and to the rise of the Roman Empire. My Boston came out in a minute. Empire. Judah. And then with the fall of Judah, and then that's it, the period of Christianity that continues up until this day. Now they're talking about, they're talking, not that I listen to them, whoever they may be, but now people are saying we're in a post-Christian era. Well, we're not. No, we're not, because we're still looking forward to the time Christ will come again. What we may be saying is we're in an era where people aren't focused on following Christ, but we are still in the same era where we are looking forward to the coming of Jesus and the second coming. And as we see, the promise is there in the first coming, and it happens. We can see for us, the promise is there for the second coming, and it will happen. And we're actually seeing great signs of this truth, this reality. This is what we're looking at. So as we understand this power, as we understand this truth, as we understand this reality, the power of Christ, and telling them the whole story, the power of Christ, and the power of the second coming based on the power of the first coming. So what basically we're seeing in this reading and we're seeing in Advent is the first coming was predicted and it happened. Do not doubt the second coming will come. But we're in the midst of this. And again, a great movie to see, to really give you a deeper understanding of it, even though there's nothing Christian about the movie in any way, shape, or form. It's pure science. is Interstellar, because it gives you that same focus of living through time while there is another aspect of time happening simultaneously. And it's fascinating. And where essentially our faith is rooted in exactly the same thing. So is Judaism. There's like two elements of time, one that what we're living in and one that what we are expecting over the millennia. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Subscribe, comment. We'll be right back. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and we're talking about this powerful reading from Numbers. Now, this brings us to have a deeper understanding of the faith. Now, let me explain. One of the things I always teach is our faith is not a moral code. It has a moral code, but it is not a moral code. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, a moral code is very simply that. It's a list of do's and don'ts. That's it. The 10 Commandments is a moral code. But the 10 Commandments does not sum up all of the Jewish faith, nor does it sum up all of Christianity. So it has a moral code, but it is not summed up in the moral code. And as we're looking at this understanding of what we're reading from the book of Numbers, what we know happened after this, and our own lives, we see that our way of really understanding our faith really begins with kind of an expanding your mind. Because, as I said, in the movie Interstellar, it's all focused on really simultaneously showing different aspects of time. And what we're seeing here is simultaneously looking at different aspects of time. One of the fascinating things that was taught in the past, of course, I grew up in I came of age in the 70s. But obviously that means I grew up in the 60s. In 1958, I was born, as you know, and 60s had this heavy drug culture, which obviously I wasn't into, especially at that young age. But we know, well, let's go to Woodstock for a minute. If you've ever seen the movie or parts of the movie, I've never sat down and actually watched the entire movie. But since they've been in the news lately, that was put out by Warner Brothers. Just so you know. And Warner Brothers bought the rights to the concert, which took everyone who ran the concert out of debt, because it was a mess, as you know, because things didn't go as they expected, and it turned into a free concert. It wasn't intended to be a free concert. But that's a story for another time. So we see that. So Warner Brothers basically put out the Woodstock movie, and the rest is history. Well, you've seen the movie. If you've seen parts of the movie, you know the famous line, I think it's, don't eat the brown acid, or don't take the brown acid. Well, obviously drugs were, especially LSD, was common then. By the way, you have to remember, LSD was not always illegal. The reason is, in our country, by our laws, you have to illegalize a drug by name or by compound or whatever. You can't just say drugs are illegal. And therefore, Congress had not yet illegalized LSD. So, and a lot of people were saying then and say now that where the drug culture came from is that people were looking to come to deeper understandings of our existence, and they use drugs. That was literally what Timothy Leary was all about. By the way, I was watching a reaction video we were talking about last week. Reaction video, and someone was watching Legend of a Mind, and it has that famous line, Timothy Leary is dead. Well, Timothy Leary was not dead at the time that that song. As a matter of fact, he lived for another 30 years. And someone saying, well, I don't know this Timothy. Obviously, they wouldn't know who he is. In today's reaction video, no, I guess he's dead, the whole bit. No, he wasn't dead then. Timothy Leary, but his whole thing is literally the experimentation he was doing at Harvard University before he got fired from Harvard University for doing this was to use drugs to come to touch the divine. That was literally what he was about, and to expand your mind. So obviously this became an issue with drug abuse, especially with LSD, which obviously, I keep saying obviously, don't do, and I wouldn't recommend it, and unless I understand there are some medically supervised issues with LSD used to treat PTSD. If you're working with medical supervision, that's a different ballgame. But obviously, this wasn't, and there were some pretty dangerous aspects of LSD. A famous performer, entertainer, TV entertainer, Art Linkletter, lost his daughter to LSD. I think she jumped out a window because it really would change your existence. Well, and they said people were trying to do this to come to a deeper understanding of our reality. If you really understand what the scriptures say, it's all there of just this whole mind expanding existence. You're seeing that there is reality, but there's different aspects of reality. You see God speaking, which we understand these prophecies came true. God speaking, but he's speaking of an understanding of time. And so you have people living in one manifestation of time while God is speaking to them in another manifestation, through another manifestation of time. And when you start realizing that, you realize basically one of the reasons why I believe that the reality of existence is so much bigger than what we simply understand if we eliminate everything to do with religion. That's why I call atheism flat earth thinking. If you really want to understand what we believe, it is huge, it is intense, it is mind expanding, because it's talking about the realities of God working through time. And where in time, God is outside of time. And this really is reflected very well in this first reading and this time of Advent. We're looking forward. We're expecting Jesus to come back. Why? Because he said he was coming back. When did he say that? 2,000 years ago. Well, wouldn't you say by now that we'd say he's probably not coming back because it's been 2,000 years? Well, how long was it under the time of Moses? Yet everything predicted then comes true. Well, if that's true, show me an example. Well, all the prophets talked about there would come a day that the whole world would worship the God of Israel. What's happening today? Well, maybe it's not yet the whole world, but a heck of a lot of it is worshiping the God of Israel. Well, how is that possible for people to say this would happen unless there is this whole expanding understanding of time and God and everything else? But if you reduce everything we believe to a moral code, you lose all of that. You might as well be an atheist. And that's why I say you can be an atheist, live Catholic teaching. You might as well be an atheist because you've reduced everything to a moral code. That's what happened in the 50s, by the way. That's what happened. This is why I don't get into a lot of the traditional ideas. Traditions are wonderful, but when people say we need to go back to the way things were in the 50s, actually we don't, because they had lost that entire mystical aspect that is central to our faith. They had lost that kind of deeper understanding of the realities and turned everything we believe into nothing more than a moral code and a philosophical code. And you lost these whole intense realities of our faith. And from the 50s, you had the children who were born after World War II, right up until 1964. Those are the baby boomers, so I'm right in the middle of that. Many of them got into drug abuse because they were looking for something bigger. They had a drive to find something bigger. They wanted to see something bigger. But everyone is saying there's nothing bigger. There's only just do what you're supposed to do. Do what you're supposed to do, and eventually you'll end up in heaven. If God so decides that you'll be into heaven, you will get into heaven. This is completely a misteaching of what we actually believe. We believe in something that is profound, that makes Interstellar, which is a fascinating movie, look like it was produced by Fisher Price. You have to understand, which obviously it wasn't. It's a wonderful movie. But you see what I'm saying? What we believe is so much more than everything you see in Interstellar. And Interstellar is all about how time works differently depending on where you are. Fascinating aspects. And this is what we're looking at. We're seeing this reality of God's time, our time, happening simultaneously, and we're seeing all of this coming together and then going, if I do this right, I always explain when I teach this, going, whoa. We'll be right back right after this.
Are you looking for guidance on how to live a purposeful and transformed life? Look no further than Romans 12, a chapter in the New Testament that offers practical wisdom for believers. Romans 12 begins with a powerful call to offer our bodies as living sacrifices to God, urging us to renew our minds and align them with His will. This chapter highlights the importance of humility, using our gifts for the benefit of others, and exercising genuine love. It teaches us to be diligent in serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, and being devoted to prayer. But it doesn't stop there. Romans 12 also teaches us to live in harmony with others, extending kindness and hospitality even to our enemies. It urges us to overcome evil with good and leave vengeance to God. So if you're seeking guidance on how to live a life of love, humility, and service, dive into Romans 12. Let its practical wisdom transform your life. Romans 12, a chapter that offers a roadmap to living a purposeful and transformed Christian life. Available now in the New Testament. Get your copy today. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media.
We're back, and we're going to continue, obviously, with the third week of Advent. Tomorrow we're going to get into the book of Zephaniah. And Zephaniah speaks to Judah and Jerusalem as they are turning away from the Lord. If you look, one of the things to be careful of is familiarity breeds contempt. And what that means, of course, is ultimately you become familiar and therefore you say, well, I have it all figured out. And when I was 18 years old, I figured I had the whole world figured out. Stupidest thing I ever thought of. And it wasn't me going until I went in the Navy and went, boy, was I wrong. And that's where I came back to the church. But you can see, once you reduce everything we believe in to nothing more than a moral code, then it just becomes, well, it's a moral code. Who cares? I'll go start my own moral code. But you can see the whole message here is that this is intense, that it's much bigger than just a moral code. And the Lord is speaking of concepts that really help us to think in a whole different way. And this is what's powerful. This is what Advent's all about. Thinking of remembering the Lord is coming back. How do we know? Because He said He was coming the first time. And guess what? He did, And you're starting to realize, wow, there's something really huge going on. And if people would stop and understand that, our world would be radically different. But it's important that you understand that. We'll be back tomorrow. Have yourself a blessed day. The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.